Hello and welcome to One Controller Port Podcast, episode 29. I'm Benjamin Yoder and I'm here this week. I don't know what I'm going to talk about this week, really. I don't have a ton to say. I went through the news and nothing really jumped out at me. But we might hit some stories as we go. It's probably going to be more of a go with the flow episode. That's probably a bad thing, seeing how the show generally goes is already a mess. Yeah, I don't really have too much to say. I think a part of the problem with that is I've been going really hard into Valkyria Revolution. So I thought Valkyria Revolution, there's this website called How Long to Beat, and it's a very useful website because it tells you how long it takes to beat a game usually. So you can hear all my typing. So Valkyria Revolution is listed for 22 and a half hours for the main story, 32 hours for the main plus extra. So over the Thanksgiving break, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna blast through the rest of Valkyria Revolution, get it finished up so I can move on to Xenoblade 2 when that comes out. It didn't end up working that way. I've been playing Valkyria Revolution and I'm probably at I don't know, 50 hours or something like that. That's the problem with How Long to Beat, is that they have different categories. There's the main story, which I said was 20 hours, main plus extra 32 hours, completionist, which is 60 hours, and then all styles, which is 40 hours. I don't know what that means. Oh, that's the average of all styles of play. Anyways, so I'm at 50 hours. So I'm definitely, it's taking a lot longer than I thought it would. But I think what I kind of have done over the last, I'd say about 5 years, is I'll usually play a game for 20 hours, fall off of it, come back to it. But I'm kind of surprised. I've been going really hard on Valkyria Revolution and I haven't really burned out. I probably started around the 15-hour mark. So that means it's been probably 35 hours that I've been playing it, and I'm still enjoying it. I mean, I would like it to get finished up so I can move on, but if I had to play another 10 hours of Valkyria Revolution, I don't think I would actually mind too much. I'm hoping I'll finish it tonight. Would be nice. We'll see. It depends. The problem is that because I've been going so hard on it, I haven't really worked on any articles or anything. But I'm really enjoying that game. I would talk about it more, but I'm probably gonna write a article of some sort about it, so I don't want to go too deep into it. I think it takes a while to get going. I'm not going to say it's a particularly good game, but there are very interesting things about it that I think are really fun to mess with. And yeah, so I'll talk about that more probably in article form. I can't imagine doing a video about it. I did record some video just in case, but it's just using the PlayStation's built-in recording software. I only recently got an HDMI capture card over the Black Friday sale, at AverMedia Live Gamer 2. But my HDMI cables are not long enough to reach the the card itself that is in my PC. So I bought some HDMI cables, which are taking a lot longer to get here than the card. So we'll see. I think I should have them by next week, and then I can start doing stuff with HDMI, which is really nice because I have a video going up this week, and that uses a HDMI to component converter, which is, I mean, it works, but it causes some issues with the coloring, the brightness, and I think you'll notice in the video when it goes up that everything's a little dimmer than it probably should be, and I'm not great at manipulating video what's the word, to fix colors. I don't have a great eye for that stuff, but yeah, but hey, hopefully this makes it so I don't have as much trouble. I bought the original. I have a Hauppauge HD PVR, an older model, and I bought it because it had S-video input as well as component. Both were really important to me for older consoles. But the problem is the S-video doesn't support 240p, so a lot. In some ways, it's kind of useless unless it's like a Dreamcast game. But yeah. So Xenoblade Chronicles 2 will probably actually be the first game I capture using that capture card. I've kind of ignored Xenoblade Chronicles 2 for the most part in terms of like watching the coverage. Like I said in a podcast like a handful of weeks ago, I don't really pay too much attention to video games before release these days, just because it's just takes a lot of time, and I think I'd rather just see the game for myself most of the time. But I did pick up Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and it's kind of interesting watching what conversation I have seen around the game. It's a lot of talk about the art style. I really don't want to get into the talk about the boob stuff. Boob stuff is whatever. Basically, I wanted to kind of talk about it's kind of interesting that the Xeno series has been something that's always been struggling with its art styles in a lot of ways. Xenogears not so much. I think probably because it's just kind of a standard anime kind of look to it. I mean, most of the game was, character sprites and then 3D models in the background for the environments, and then like character portraits. I mean, there's definitely a art style to that game. Don't get me wrong. But I'd say it looks like many other JRPGs of its time. Thousand Arms. I thought about Thousand Arms recently, when I probably shouldn't have thought about Thousand Arms recently. I may play some Thousand Arms soon. That's a weird thing to say again. I have a history with Thousand Arms. I wrote a couple articles about Thousand Arms, I think. Anyways, but then you get into like Xenosaga and everything. Everyone in that game kind of looks like plastic dolls. It kind of came around that Dreamcast to PlayStation 2 jump where we had these higher polygon character models, but we didn't necessarily have like it didn't seem like the developers really understood how to use those polygons to their fullest extent, and so you get these very strange looking but still like high polygon count characters. Something like Shadow of Destiny has this too, where they just look so stiff and awkward. And again, like plastic dolls, they have no life to them in a lot of ways. But they Xenosaga, I think, suffers from that transition. And then you see Xenosaga 2, and they go very into like let's do a super realistic look to this game. And I wouldn't say it looks ugly, but I would say it definitely doesn't fit the spirit of that franchise. It looks very, very plain. Everyone just looks very, very like not human enough to be like, oh, this looks really impressive, but not fantastical enough to really fit the previous game's anime kind of art style to it. And I think Xenosaga 3 probably hit a happy midpoint of like these characters have more realistic features to them, so they don't look like plastic dolls, but they're still very much kind of in that exaggerated facial expressions and stuff like that. It's a good looking game. As much as I don't like Xenosaga 3, I'll give it that. It's a good looking game. Xenoblade, I usually don't see too many people complain about the art style of Xenoblade Chronicles. Most of what I see is just complaints about the how the game looks on the Wii, and I'll tell you this right now: Xenoblade looks absolutely fantastic on the Wii. But that you always have to tack on the Wii on there because it is essentially a GameCube. Two GameCubes taped together. I forget who said that. It is a low-powered console, and what they did with that is absolutely amazing, and it's crazy. It ran at a smooth frame rate. I'm not really sure how they did that and pulled it off, because I don't know if they spent a ton of time on the Wii outside of Disaster Day of Crisis. But they made the most out of that hardware. But in turn, when you zoomed in on the characters and like the environment, they were low poly and often low detail. I will say that the characters, and I never could put my finger on it, but there's something about the characters that I find oddly appealing. I don't know. They're like strangely low detail, but also very expressive. In a way that I wouldn't say looks particularly good, but but I still like it for some reason. I wish I had better words to put that into, but I don't at the moment. Maybe someday I will. It's kind of funny though, because if you look at the original Xenoblade trailers, the characters actually have higher detail faces. But I think maybe what happened, and I'm not sure. I mean, obviously I haven't dug into the game files, but I think what happened is they decided to keep one character model for each character throughout the game. Essentially, I mean, like there's different character models in terms of like outfits and stuff. But like the face detail, they kind of keep it the same no matter what the situation is, as far as I can tell. And so that's probably why it's lower detail than what the original face models were back in, when that game was originally shown off in like 2009, 2008 maybe. I don't remember when that game was revealed, but yeah, it's definitely not I think that game probably has my favorite art style. And then there's Xenoblade Chronicles X, which I think the big point of contention with that game is the character faces. They have these big bug eyes, and I would say that they probably lean closer to the original like Xenosaga camp, where it's like these character models that have very doll like features, and maybe that's part of the transition from the Wii to the Wii U. I mean, far as I know, that's the first time Monolith had worked on an HD console kind of thing. They didn't really have that power for them before. And I think that part of might have been that transition. I will say even with Xenoblade Chronicles 2, the environments between all the Xenoblade games, I think have a fairly consistent art style. If you take an environment from Xenoblade 1 and then compare it to like an environment in Xenoblade 2, I think Xenoblade 1 might have more fantastical elements to it. But I think if you look at like the density and the type of terrain and the look of the terrain, it generally looks pretty in line, and that's true for Blade 2 from what I've seen so far as well. And I'm just a little disappointed with Xenoblade 2, and again, I haven't played the game, so maybe once you get in the world and everything, it feels a lot more fitting, but it does seem a little more generic, something more in line with like the Tales series, with how Xenoblade Chronicles 2 looks. I do think the blades look really over-designed and overly complicated in a lot of ways, and I think this is true of a lot of... I think of like something like BlazBlue or some of the characters I look at in that game, it's like, oh my fucking god, what is going on with this person? I like very plain clothing though. And I think that's part of why I like Xenoblade's 1's look too, is that the characters all have these very like standard clothings. Eventually you can get like very gaudy armor, but I like my hobo clothes in a lot of ways. Not even hobo clothes, just like clothes that look like normal clothes. Final Fantasy XIV 1.0, you have all these characters who are just wearing like cloth and leather, and it's just like these very practical looking outfits, which doesn't make for great MMO design of like, I'm going to make my character look like the most badass thing. And it's like, no, I look like the guy who like just got back from herding his sheep. and I'm gonna go fight this battle now with my sword. I think if I ever go back to Final Fantasy XIV, I'll probably focus more on like very plain clothing, like if I do glamour, because I just don't really like the over design of the armor in most MMOs. I think Final Fantasy XI eventually got to that point, but early on it had very practical looking armor for the most part. I shouldn't say practical, but very, very toned down. But yeah, I maybe I'll come around on it. I mean, I didn't like how the original Xenoblade Chronicles X. I didn't like how Xenoblade Chronicles X looked originally. either, but it eventually grew on me. Even the faces didn't bother me too much, but I'm someone who generally absorbs that stuff initially. Like, it's part of why I can play games that are like Nintendo 64 or PlayStation games that run at like really bad frame rates or look like awful meshes at times. I generally let that stuff meld into the background, and I just kind of accept that this is what the game looks like for the most part. Even Valkyria Revolution, which I was talking earlier in this podcast, early on, a lot of those characters look real bad. But over time, I just kind of stopped thinking about it too much. The only one I can't stop thinking of is like the spy lady that's in your party. She just has like such a crushed head and like so like alien looking proportions that it drives me crazy. She's the one character that I really can't just like gloss over when I look at, but it's not a particularly great game. Also, the Valkyria's boobs are like massive in a way that they're just like huge in screen at all times. Not in a like, oh, they should respect women kind of way. Just they're fucking enormous missile tits, like bigger than her head. I don't know. One day they'll stop making Savaria. If you heard all that noise, I picked up the game case and was looking at the Valkyria. I don't like Savaria. I think Savaria is the worst character in the Valkyria Chronicles series. She's just so boring. Like, she's like, oh no, I'm actually being controlled by the evil empire, and that's basically what this Valkyria is too. I like the Valkyria in Valkyria Chronicles too. I completely changed topic. Let's go to the fortune cookie segments. I don't really have too much more to say about Xenoblade 2. I need to play the game more first, more than anything. But I don't know why that popped up because I have not played that game. I think I talked about Kingdom Hearts already, so I'm just gonna skip past that. Okay, I have some sorting issues going on because I have not played that game either. Jesus. This is a bad fortune cookie. Okay. Hey! This fortune cookie, I went through like 6 fortune cookies. One of them I could have talked about, Hakuoki, but yeah. I haven't played enough Hakuoki to really feel good about talking about it. Disaster Day of Crisis, also a Monolith Soft game. This is Monolith Soft Podcast Central. Hello. Disaster Day of Crisis is a game I was super excited for, and it's actually why I got into Monolith Soft in the first place. I did have a Xenosaga, back when it came out on the PS2, but I didn't like it when I first played it. So it wasn't until 2008 when, or around that time when, I think 2006 maybe when they announced it, when Disaster Day of Crisis was announced, and I was like, this game looks cool. I like B-action movie kind of games. I love Blue Stinger. I love, over-the-top voice acting. And Disaster Day of Crisis is just that, and I love variety in games. I love stuff like in Super Mario Odyssey where each character you capture makes a different gameplay experience. And Disaster Day of Crisis has all these different basically you're in this city and you're surviving a bunch of natural disasters that are happening back to back to back. And so like each part of the game you kind of have times where you're like trying to get through a hurricane. There's a volcano exploding. You're driving a car driving a car away from a tsunami. It's just a lot of really neat stuff in the game. And visually it's all very different as well. But it's really at most it's an on-rail shooter with like some like exploration aspects to it. Because every shooting segment is just like kind of going around and shooting these soldiers called Surge. I think they're originally called Storm, but they changed them to Surge. I don't remember. It's been a while. But yeah, I really wanted to love Disaster Day of Crisis, and I still love it to some extent. It's just not as good as I was hoping it would be. It's definitely a fun game, though. If you have a way to play in board games, Disaster Day of Crisis is definitely one of the funner B kind of Wii games to play. It's just not particularly amazing, but I love how the game and the story progresses, and the voice acting is great. If you have a Japanese and a European copy, they have all the same voice actors, but 2 different sets of voice acting. So apparently in Japan, they recorded the voices originally. Then Nintendo of America got the game and was like, this voice acting is terrible, or these lines are terrible. So they rewrote the lines for Nintendo of America and then re-recorded the voice acting. So the Japanese version still released with the original voiced lines that they had recorded, but the European version actually uses the Nintendo of America edits that Nintendo of America didn't like anyways. Nintendo of America did not want to sell Disaster Day of Crisis. There's a whole like background of like Reggie saying it's a game not worth the value. Not worth any value, or like not worth the $50 value of putting a game on a shelf, basically. Which was not supposed to come out as it did, and it did. Like while Nintendo of Europe was trying to sell the game, and it was really crazy. I love Disaster Day of Crisis. I should do more on Disaster Day of Crisis, but I definitely have to replay it at this point. It's been so long. But it's originally what made me love Monolith, that game, and it's nothing like their other games. I would love for them to return to something that has the variety of Disaster Day of Crisis, but really what Disaster Day of Crisis was an action game for people who weren't, didn't play video games very often. That it was on-rails shooter for a reason. It's easy to pick up and play. The disasters were all just like little mini games where you're like shaking the controllers to run, using the Wii remote to drive the car, and none of it was particularly great. And this is probably have with any game with a lot of variety, is that you can't really polish all these individual segments to be like a great playing thing. You're not going to make a great car game in a game that has, maybe 10 minutes worth of driving in it. It's going to be all janky because you're not going to have the time to spend on that stuff. There used to be a title or a phrasing that I used to use. I don't remember where I got it from. Maybe it was from some other thing, but I used to call them bridge titles. Things like Dragon Quest Swords, the Kinect Star Wars games, stuff like that, where it's taking a game concept that is generally, not played by people who don't play video games, and then it's trying to simplify them down in a way that that it's more accessible. And I would say you generally, like almost always, like with Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, you're gonna have a worse game in a lot of ways, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad game or not a fun game. It's just really different. Mystic Quest has like Zelda overworld elements that are put into it to kind of give more of an action feel to the game. Bridge titles are fascinating, and I'm sad that they seem to be kind of gone. Nobody's really trying to convert a Wii type audience player into a full game player anymore. But Disaster Day of Crisis is definitely one of those titles. It's an action game for people who are casuals, essentially. People don't like using the word casuals. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's I think in the context of like how you say it, it can be a bad thing. But I think it's a good word to describe people who aren't particularly super into games, and don't know how to use like a standard controller well, don't know how to play a first-person shooter well. But you can boil it down to the core elements of these games and try to present them to a new audience. And that may not necessarily be great for the current audience. And I think the problem with these bridge games is that they aren't necessarily great for the casual audience either. They're kind of games that are made for people that I don't think exist, that are like trying to bridge that gap between casual and like a hardcore game experience. But I really like those games just because they're so simple in a lot of ways, but they're boiling very complex ideas into simple elements. Dragon Quest Swords is a like 10-hour JRPG that really, like, each character has like 6 spells, and then you just sit there and like slash and block using a shield during combat. It's more action focused. Dragon Quest Swords is essentially an on-rails sword fighting game. But yeah, all those games I recommend if you have like a really open mind. If you're looking for like the greatest AAA game, absolutely not. Don't even consider it. But if you want to look for something with a lot of variety or like a different perspective on a series or genre that you've kind of come to fully understand, games like Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, Dragon Quest Swords, and Disaster Day of Crisis are really fantastic games for those. That's going to do it for this week. Hopefully it wasn't too all over the place for this episode. A lot of Monolith talk. I'm a big Monolith Soft fan. I think they generally do good with their games. I've been hearing a lot of bad things about Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but we'll see. I heard a lot of bad things about Valkyria Revolution, and I'm not going to tell you that Valkyria Revolution is a great game, but there are some fascinating design decisions in Valkyria Revolution that don't particularly add up to make a great game, but are really fun to play with. So yeah, there are parts of Valkyria Revolution I really like. So I hope you read that article because it's a fun game. It just takes time and patience to get into it, I think. And I think it comes down to there's a understanding of the game's mechanics you need to have into how to kind of fully optimize your team's party. I've seen a lot of people compare it to a Muso game, and I guess maybe if there's like a morale segment in a Muso game, maybe that would apply. But if you're talking about it from like, oh, I'm just going to smash square or X or whatever, I don't think that really applies to Valkyria Revolution, although there are very spammy elements in the game, but it usually requires a bit of setup before those spammy elements really come into play. So that's gonna be it for this week. Thanks to you guys. I wrote an article about Strange Telephone, an iPhone and Android game. If you want to go read that, it is on my blog. It's a neat game. Kind of reminds me a little bit of No Man's Sky, except for it's not like No Man's Sky at all. but yeah, check it out. And other than that, though, I hope you guys have a good week, and thanks for listening. Bye.